Hello, my name is Maximo Mendez Dominguez, and today we are addressing one of the most tragic problems of the 21st century. The central question of our investigation is, why haven't governments been able to stop famine? According to recent data from the United Nations World Food Programme, we are currently experiencing an unprecedented global food crisis. In fact, reports indicate that over 300 million people face acute hunger, and horrifyingly, recent history has seen simultaneous famines confirmed in places like Gaza and Sudan. The scale of this suffering raises an immediate question. Is it because the earth cannot produce enough food? The scientific answer is a definitive no. Academic research has proven that global agricultural production is sufficient to feed the entire human population.
الجراد والفئران وكل الطيور الموجود في الغابة وكل الحيوانات الموجود في الغابة يعوز مساعدنا يمكن ده الحاجات اللي قاعدين ناكلها حسه كده.
We spot a boy who's caught and cooked a plate of rats. Here, that's a rare source of meat. Do you have any other food? Does anyone bring food here?
Therefore, if availability is not the problem, we must look more closely at the true structural failure: access, distribution, and political will. As the Nobel Prize-winning economist Amartya Sen famously demonstrated in his structural analysis of human food crises, famine is not only a question of availability, but of access and distribution, and thus is deeply tied to power relations.
Amid the crush of bodies clamoring for food, children are being put to an unthinkable test. Who will manage to fill their family pot, and who will have to wait another day to eat? This is how Gaza's children are being forced to live as Israel continues to block the entry of food. A total siege that is now in its 11th week. A boy burnt by the small prize of lentil soup he has managed to win. Girl scooping what remains with her bare hands. But before it all, a search for food, for them and their families, with no guarantee of success. I wake up every day, then we go find a kitchen. If we don't find food, then we go to another kitchen and another kitchen, Mohammed explains. If we don't find anything, we go all day without food. Nearly all of Gaza's population now experiencing crisis levels of food insecurity or worse, with 56% at the emergency or catastrophic level, meaning very high rates of acute malnutrition and large gaps in food consumption. Unless aid gets in, more than 3/4 of the population are projected to fall to those emergency levels. As this man-made crisis worsens, Israel and the United States approving a new, tightly controlled mechanism to get aid into some parts of Gaza. A person involved in the planning said Israel has agreed to allow some aid into Gaza in the coming days, but Israel has yet to say so publicly. The UN says it won't participate, saying the new plan will make things worse, facilitating forced displacement and putting civilians at risk.
When we look closely, we realize that governments fail to stop famine because they treat food as a privilege or a political tool, rather than a fundamental human right. Over the next 10 minutes, my colleagues will break down the exact mechanisms from economic failures to armed conflict that keep humanity trapped in this artificial cycle of starvation.
Thank you, Maximo. My name is Javier Arezabalo, and I will focus on how domestic policies, economic problems, and environmental shocks create barriers that governments seem unable or unwilling to break.
The world's leading authority on food crises has said that Gaza's largest city is in famine. The group known as the IPC has said that Gaza City is in the grips of famine and it is likely to spread it to other parts of the Strip. Now, this grim milestone is the first famine determination in the Middle East, and it comes after months of aid groups warning that Israel's restrictions on aid and continued offensive in Gaza have led people to be in a dire humanitarian situation, pushing Palestinians to the brink of starvation. Now, this comes as Israel said it is ramping up its offensive in Gaza, particularly around Gaza City. Israel said it has plans to move ahead with this. There are hundreds of thousands of people sheltering there. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said there is no hunger in Gaza and has said there is no policy of starvation. In response to the IPC findings, the army has called them false and rejects it, and said that in recent weeks there has been a scale-up of aid that has gone into the Strip. But aid groups say whatever's coming in is not enough, and they warn that if hundreds of thousands of people are forced to evacuate Gaza City, it is only going to exacerbate the situation. They say people are weak, they are starving, and it is going to be very hard for people to move. The IPC says the situation is expected to get worse and says what is needed is an immediate ceasefire as well as unhindered, unrestricted access of aid into Gaza.
The United Nations has repeatedly warned that climate change is one of the main causes of food insecurity. Weather events like El Niño can destroy crops and reduce farmers' incomes. However, natural disasters only become famines when governments fail to respond effectively because of poor leadership or weak public policies.
In 1877, a powerful El Niño event disrupted weather patterns across the globe, triggering one of the deadliest climate disasters in recorded history. Warm waters spread across the Pacific Ocean, weakening monsoon rains in India, China, Brazil, and parts of Africa. Crops withered under relentless drought, rivers dried up, and millions faced starvation. The crisis, known as the Great Famine of 1876 to 1878, claimed an estimated 30 to 50 million lives worldwide. At a time when global weather science was still in its infancy, few understood the true cause behind the catastrophe. The El Niño of 1877 revealed how a single shift in the Pacific Ocean could reshape weather and human history across entire continents.
A study by the International Food Policy Research Institute, or IFPRI, supports this idea. It states that food shortages in peaceful places illustrate that good governance, like peace, is a precondition for preventing famine. In simple terms, good governments prepare for crisis before they become humanitarian disasters. But when leaders focus on short-term economic benefits rather than long-term agricultural resilience, they leave the population much more vulnerable. Furthermore, economic shocks hit low and middle income countries especially hard. According to the World Bank, rising fertilizer costs and higher food prices have put enormous pressure on household budgets. So even when food is available, people still cannot afford it. When governments face slow economic growth, they often make the mistake of cutting social programs to reduce spending. Instead of investing in sustainable agriculture and stronger infrastructure, some also introduce restrictive policies such as export bans on staple crops. And although these measures may seem helpful at first, they often make food shortages even worse in neighboring countries. To conclude, famine is not caused by just one factor. Climate change, economic instability, and poor public policies work together. A drought may begin the crisis, but weak institutions and poor decisions will often turn that crisis into a humanitarian disaster. These structural problems also create the conditions for famine to be used during armed conflicts, which is exactly what our next speaker will explain.
Hello, my name is Juan David Leiro. To conclude our analysis, we need to talk about the darkest reasons why governments fail to stop famine, the deliberate use of starvation as a political and military strategy, together with the weakening of international humanitarian system. The UN Security Council approved Resolution 2417, which condemned the use of starvation against civilians during war. However, this law is often ignored. A geopolitical and legal study published in 2026 explained that famine is not just an unintended consequence of war. In many cases, it is used as a strategy to control population. During armed conflict, military forces destroy farms, interrupt food supplies, and block humanitarian aid. As the war food program says, starvation has become the cheapest weapon of mass destruction. In many conflict zones, governments choose military objectives instead of protecting their people's access to food. The international community is also failing. Organizations such as Action Against Hunger have warned about a serious global funding crisis. Many wealthy countries have reduced their humanitarian budgets, making it harder for aid agencies to respond before a famine becomes severe.
More than 3% of the world's population is going hungry. This World Hunger Day, we look at why millions of people don't have enough to eat. The most extreme level of food insecurity now affects twice as many people as it did in 2023, and nearly everyone facing hunger today lives in a conflict zone. In Gaza, the entire population is facing near total starvation, and famine is already underway in much of Sudan. Millions of people around the world are at risk of experiencing famine. Many more don't know where their next meal will come from. Children bear the heaviest burden, and though women grow most of the food in low-income countries, they are often the last to eat and the first to go without. So why does hunger persist in a world of plenty? War disrupts food systems by destroying infrastructure and access. Conflict forces families to flee their homes for safety, and displaced people often end up hungrier and poorer. Extreme weather events linked to the climate crisis were also affecting more than 3 times more people last year than in 2018. And economic shocks from soaring prices to unemployment have made food unaffordable for many. Just as hunger peaks, support systems are vanishing. Funding to humanitarian food sectors is expected to be cut by almost half in 2025. So the outlook for the rest of this year is grim, especially as war, climate change, and economic instability worsen around the globe. The UN once promised to end hunger by 2030, but global crises have undone years of progress. What would it cost to eradicate hunger? Up to $4 trillion to keep everyone fed, or more than $15 trillion to make food affordable for everyone in the world.
In conclusion, governments have not stopped famine because international laws are not strong enough to punish those responsible, and global political interests often come before humanitarian actions. Until food security becomes a higher